Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bucks County Free Library's Tech Talk series. My name is Adam Gilbert Cole. I am the district consultant librarian here, and today I'm standing in for Matt, who is the IT director, and I'm with Pete and Zach on the IT team who are helping me run the program today. So our Tech Talk series, if you haven't been here before or signed in online, is an ongoing series of talks about various technology-related subjects. Those subjects are chosen by you, basically. We email everybody, we poll you at the end of the program, and we try to answer your questions. So you may have questions as we go along today. You can drop them in the Zoom chat feature, which we are using, or at about halfway through, we're going to take a break and we'll come around and gather questions so we can answer them online. The Tech Talk series is a monthly meeting that meets on the third Wednesday of each month. So we're meeting in person here in Doylestown or over Zoom. You can meet us, like we said, in person. We have gatherings at some of our branches. You can check online on the events calendar. The main live meeting is at the Doylestown branch. And these sessions are being recorded. So after each talk, you can find the talks on the BCFL YouTube channel, which we link from our website, buckslib.org. You can click on events, and then you can click on recorded tech talks. It does take a little while for us to process those. So sometimes it takes up to a week for them to get onto the website. As I said, we are using the Zoom chat feature. If you're tuned in on Zoom, hey, everybody, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat room there. Try to keep the questions on topic. Treat each other with respect in the chat room there, or you may be removed from today's meeting. So check the top post in the Zoom chat for more info. Today's discussion is AI in 2025. We opened the questions up to folks who registered, and we didn't get a lot, so I'm going to riff a little bit today, everybody, and try to pretend I know more than I do about artificial intelligence in 2025. You will probably have questions or even suggestions for me as we go through. Like I said, hang on to your questions until midway through. We'll come back and address them after we take a break. So let's start. AI in 2025. I did a lot of research for this, and I still feel like I only scratched the surface, which probably tells you a lot about where we are as a field in 2025. But I want to start, and what we usually start with in these programs is talk about what AI is. When you hear the term AI nowadays, it's pretty confusing. 5 years ago, you were probably still thinking in the sci-fi sort of like robots and things answering your questions, Star Trek, computer sort of stuff. Nowadays, it's everywhere, right? We tune into the news, we hear about AI, we read about it. We're going to talk a little bit about what AI is before I start to talk about the uses and applications in 2025 and what makes it different in 2025 versus even 2 months ago in December 2024. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some buzzwords that I guess we're going to call them here. If you are reading any kind of article online, if you're, like I said, tuning into the news or watching a YouTube video about AI, you're definitely going to see at least these three phrases. There's a couple more you may see as we go through, but I want to cover what they are before we get into what AI is and what it does. And so I want to start with large language models because that's sort of the basis of AI as we know it in 2025. And I think in analogies, I don't know about the rest of you, but I tend to understand things better when I can sort of tone them down a little bit and make it relate to something else in my brain that maybe makes a little more sense. So if we think of, say, you've got a pop band, and they have written hundreds and hundreds of songs all across different styles. They've got lots and lots of different titles and lyrics, and they're no longer making music. And you're desperate to hear another song by this pop band. What we've done with AI and large language models is we've taken a computer program, something like that, and we have fed it all hundreds of those songs written by the pop band in anticipation of being able to ask this computer model, "Computer, can you write me a new song by this pop band? Can you take the lyrics that they do, the sort of music, the instruments that they make their songs in, the sort of tone, the all that sort of thing. Can you make a new song for me? Can you take all of the cues that they've put together into their songs and help me figure out what a new song by this pop band would sound like? So that's where I start with understanding large language models. And then you zoom out and you think, well, what does ChatGPT do, right? We sit and we take a box and we type in a question, and it does its best to answer those questions in the same sort of model. Well, what we've done is instead of fed a computer model hundreds of different pop songs, we've fed it pretty much the entirety of the internet and said, can you answer these questions for me based on what you've learned about what comes first and what comes next and what comes next in this large language model? And when we say large language model, we mean just the biggest data set that you can think of. So that's a large language model. We also are going to talk a lot about generative AI. I think, and Pete and Zach can help me out here, but I think most AI, as we are dealing with it these days, is generative AI. We're talking about AI where you have a computer program, something built on a large language model. You ask it a question, you are asking it to generate something in response to that. It may be textual AI, or it may be textual response. You may have asked it a question and said, answer this question for me. As we'll see later, you may be giving it a textual prompt and say, turn this into a picture for me. Or it could be video, which is still in its infancy. There's a lot of different, we may show this later, but there is actually AI for creating songs nowadays. You can play around with and hear songs in different genres in that AI. So generative AI is just, we are asking this AI model, this AI program to generate something for us. Tied up into all that is machine learning. This is kind of a step back from large language models. The machine learning is where we have a giant data set of something. We've got a data set that has 100,000 apples in it and 100,000 oranges in it. And we give it a parameter that oranges weigh this much and they're rough, and apples weigh this much and they're smooth. And we're asking a program to learn what each point in that data set is based on those parameters, so that when we start feeding it new data as it goes through, it can decide what's an apple, what's an orange. It can build on its knowledge and make some decisions based on the data set that we've fed it. We're asking a machine to teach itself, basically, which is kind of cool, but a little bit scary, right? All right. So that's the high level view of AI in 2025 and our basics. What I really want to do for the next 10 or 15 minutes is just demonstrate some of what AI can do here. And I'm going to ask, I guess, some questions from the audience and show you basically what these different companies are putting out there in the field right now. Once we get past that, I'm going to talk about, again, what makes AI in 2025 different than AI in December of 2024. All right. I'm going to switch over to the display on this laptop, everybody. So let's start with the big one, right? Everybody's heard of ChatGPT these days, right? I see a couple of nods out there in the audience, and hopefully you in the audience with me know what ChatGPT is. A company called OpenAI has an AI program called ChatGPT. It's, I guess, one of the big the starting. Yeah, the starting programs in the AI world. I don't know if you can call it a founder when the field is like, what, 2 years old at this point, but
certainly a first mover.
yeah. Pete just said they have first mover advantage, which means they were pretty much the first big name in the market, which in a technology company is the one that you want to be in a field. ChatGPT, if you haven't played around with it yet, looks exactly like this, right? You go in and you've got a box, and we're all used to this box. This box looks a lot like a search engine did when we first started using Google, when you could just type in a question and you would get the crawler responses from Google. Google would interpret your question and try to just give you web pages that related to what you were asking it. In this case, um, I can ask ChatGPT to do some generative tasks instead of just some surfacing tasks. So let's say that I was sitting in a meeting with my colleagues and we suddenly decided that Tech Talks was a bad name for this program. What are some good names for a library program that teaches technology skills to the public? All right, so ChatGPT, first of all, I was going to make sure I agree to its terms and services, which is our default operating procedure on the internet. But what it's going to do is it's going to go through and it's going to suggest some names for programs. And you can see some of these, instead of sitting around in a committee and asking it to come up with some names for these programs. Now, some of these are great. Some of these may not fit very well. Code and create, I don't know, right? I'm not teaching you all how to code here, but Tech Savvy Series feels pretty cool. Um, Smart Start Tech. Yeah, right. This is pretty cool. Now, this can do a whole bunch of things for you. You've got a whole bunch of questions, but um, I don't know. Does anybody have anything they want to ask ChatGPT right now? You may not, and that's okay. But what should I name my new cat who is orange and likes to eat mice? Right. Now, Frito. I like Frito. Okay, so ChatGPT is fun and it can be a little frivolous, but it also can be used in, yeah, yeah, absolutely. How's that? Is that better? Okay, great. Yep, not a problem. Um, yeah, so this is fun, right? This is a cute use case for ChatGPT. You can go in and you can play around and get a feel for what it's going to do. What it can also do is say, right, write in write an email to my colleague asking them to send me the report on quarterly earnings in a polite way that would downplay how annoyed I am at not having the report. I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to follow up on the quarterly earnings report as I haven't received it yet. If you could send it my way at your earliest convenience. So I can certainly do that myself, right? I can sit down and write an email like that myself. What ChatGPT does is generate some text for you, generate some ideas for you. It's often very useful if you're sitting stuck and trying to come up with something that can help you get unstuck, get started, right? Um, ChatGPT has the same downfalls that a lot of generative AI does, which are you have to be careful about the output, right? It is not thinking, it is looking at its gigantic data set of what word follows the next word, and it is trying to figure out based on your input. I said, generate an email that is polite about quarterly report earnings. And it's taking all those input terms and it's trying to come up with an output that is going to suit my needs. It's not always going to suit my needs. And this is a pretty good way of using ChatGPT because it's pretty generic. I haven't given it any personally identifying information, and it's not very field specific. You may have heard that in the news that there are some legal cases these days that are getting tossed out because lawyers have gone to ChatGPT or similar text AI programs to generate their case files, their filings, and the AI programs have generated completely made up case studies that they are referring back to in their filings. And so they're trying to, refer back to case law that just doesn't exist because they're using ChatGPT to generate things. ChatGPT, that is called a hallucination. We call it a hallucination in terms of AI and AI programs. It's a fancy programmer way of saying, oops, I made a mistake. A lot of text programs, uh, I wouldn't say a lot, and it's getting better every day, which is one of the reasons that we do these programs every few months nowadays. But if you had asked me 6 months ago, I would have said you get a hallucination fairly often when you're asking ChatGPT these sort of things. But the more people use ChatGPT, the more ChatGPT gets a bigger data set, it builds its model better. And we're going to talk a little bit, like I said, about AI in 2025 and the way that some of these models have changed. You will run into less hallucinations nowadays than you used to when you were doing the searching online or doing when you were using ChatGPT online. All right, so OpenAI, ChatGPT, we've heard about that. Has anybody heard about Google Gemini? All right. A lot of big tech companies, Google, Apple has it built into their phones now. If you've updated recently, you see Apple Intelligence is built into their phones. Meta, which is the company that owns Facebook, Microsoft has Copilot. Everybody wants in on the ground floor of artificial intelligence, and so everybody has one of these programs. When we are done, hopefully, we can put together something to go on the little note field on our YouTube channel so you can refer back to that and get some of the links out to these programs. But Google Gemini is Google's answer to ChatGPT. And also, it does all of the things that ChatGPT has started to build into it. So Google Gemini will do the same thing we just did with ChatGPT. I can ask it a question, it'll answer me a question, right? What it also does is create an image in a painterly expressionistic style of a six-legged cat. And we wait a little bit because in the background, millions and millions of processes are running on server farms across the globe for Google to create. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that one. And there's my. Now, what's really funny is look at that closely, everybody. It's got 7 legs, right? It doesn't have 6 legs, it has 7 legs. Um, this kind of technology, image generation, is still a few steps back from the text generation that we see in a lot of the programs that you can find online. ChatGPT, Google Gemini is good at this. Microsoft Copilot is good at text generation. There are a whole bunch of others that have concentrated on image generation. Stable Diffusion is one of them. What's the other one off the top of your head? Do you remember? Yeah, Midjourney. Midjourney is the other one, right? Midjourney and Stable Diffusion started in the image generation field and probably have a little bit of a head start. They're a little harder to access, which makes makes Google Gemini a little easier to use. One of the things you can do with this image generation, though, is you can go back and you can say, well, that's close, but make the brush strokes thicker in that image. Make that full screen and hopefully it. And we still got, oh no, now we've got 4 legs on one side and 2 legs on another side. And right, so they're computers. They're trying to determine the best method for answering your query for getting to what you are prompting it to do. And you can see that I didn't give it very detailed prompt here. If I went back in and really refined my prompt, if I gave it a color scheme, if I said, do it in the style of this artist, if I said, make sure that the legs are equal on both sides, do it from a face-on perspective instead of from a side profile or a 3/4 profile like it is now, it'll start to iterate on that and you can refer back to the things that it does. One of the things that makes this kind of generative AI handy is that you can keep going back to the things that it has generated and say, okay, step back 2 steps. Let's go back and retry with these different prompts and try to get something else out of it. It understands the process step by step and can take those steps back if you're prompting it. If you're prompting it is important there. Yeah.
Information out there to be able to
That's a great question. So we had just had a question here in the audience about who was putting this information together out there to gather it. Actually, if it's okay, I'll answer that a little bit later when we're going to talk about the ethics of AI a little bit and what goes into creating the data that lets you prompt a program to generate something like this. It's complicated, not just from a programming perspective, but also from an ethical perspective. All right, so that's image generation, everybody. I do want to take a few minutes to show you some other things here, and that is, let me get out of full screen mode so I can go. All right, I did say that there was a music generation program that you can use. There are a couple of them that are sort of in their infancy. Udio.com is one that you can make use of. You can go into the program and give it a prompt. Write a torch song in the style of Sinatra with lyrics about my six-legged cat. Now, what it's going to do in the background here is it will take a little while. You can see on the right hand of my screen here where my mouse is moving around. It's not going to generate as quickly as a text prompt, even an image, because at this point you're generating a much bigger file that the computer has to turn up for you in the form of drums and instruments and hopefully somebody that sort of maybe sounds a little bit like Sinatra. We're going to find out in a few minutes. Yeah, this is one of those things that like textual AI, I get. Image generation AI, yeah, I start to get a little weird about it because I have friends who are graphic designer, artists, that sort of thing. The idea that you can tell a computer program to write a song just blows my mind. And you can see it takes a little while for it to put this together here. It runs in the background. I could go in and ask it to generate another song. What it's doing, or what I have access to at this point, is the free tier on this program. A lot of these programs will offer you a free tier where they give you a certain number of credits per month, and you can go in and ask it to generate an image for, this many credits. But they got to make money somehow. It sure costs a lot of money to run a server, all the electricity, all the people that you have to pay to build these data sets. And so they have to make money somehow. And so what they're going to do is they're going to get you hooked on it with a few free credits and then get you to sign up for a subscription based on that. This is taking longer than my original creation. My original creation, I gave it the prompt of write a jangly guitar ballad in the style of REM. I think I also told it to write about cats. I may have cats on the brain today, everybody. Oh no! Where did it go? I don't know if I'm going to get it to play the audio here. Hold on a second.
the audio might try to go.
Yes, actually, now that I think about it, the audio is trying to go through my camera. All right, that is a bummer because I really wanted you all to hear that, and hopefully I can link it in the YouTube video when you go from here. Just trust me that while it did okay, and you could certainly hear instrumentation. You had a voice that was singing a song. It was a female voice, so it wasn't really in the style of REM, right? REM had Michael Stipe very famously singing in a craggly tenor, baritone. The instrumentation was fine, but you couldn't really tell what the instruments were. It was hitting notes, it had a rhythm, it had a beat. But more likely than not, it didn't really sound like guitars. It didn't sound like the sort of style that I was going for there. I'm a little sad that I can't hear the Sinatra song with all you sitting here while we're together because I feel like it would be amazing. Um, but that is UDO. There are some web-based startups that are working in the video field also nowadays. I didn't do a ton of research on this because I feel like this one is still even more so than audio uh, at a point where it's hard to really see it uh, functioning well at this point. They're really iterating on this process. And I think this is way more gated behind actual programs you load onto your device rather than log into on a website. But Synthesia is one that you can use to create video. Um, Again, I could give it a prompt here, but we'd be sitting and waiting for 20 minutes for it to actually turn out a 10-second video that wouldn't be very impressive at this point. So if you want to play around with this, do feel free to look up video generative AI. Just head to Google and search for it, and you'll be able to find a few programs online to play around with. Um, all right. So this is the basis of AI in 2025. We're still starting from a place where like you can go and look for programs online and play around with this stuff. But I do want to talk about what we see as sort of trends in AI in 2025. And then we'll talk about what the downsides of AI in 2025 are. All right. So first, the big one. Everywhere I went to look when I was looking up trends in AI in 2025 is that this is the year that you are now going to be interacting with customer service, artificial intelligent agents online, and ideally in a way that is way less frustrating than it was in 2023 and 2024. I know everybody's laughing in the audience here. And I will admit that I sort of feel the same way, but one of the reasons that this is true is that there was a demonstration back in December, and then at the very end of January, OpenAI released an update, a new version of their AI model called O3 for OpenAI. Google Gemini, oh, I'm not going to get it right, but Google Gemini had an iteration also. They did a demonstration on stage where their product development lead was asking the AI agent, they gave it an image and they said, generate a grocery list for me based on what you see in this image. And so it took the image and it sort of broke down what the image was and what it saw. And it went out and it looked for recipes and it started generating a recipe list and it put it together until it got to the point where it was trying to figure out what type of flour to buy. And it got stuck. And then it said, hold on a second. I'm going to go back to the recipes list and do another search and try to come up with the right type of flour. And so it went back and it did the search and it figured out what type of flour it was calling for in this recipe list. And this is a thing that AI hasn't been able to do previously, which is you are used to interacting with it, or I'm used to interacting with it and checking all of its mistakes and saying, oh, that's a mistake, that's a hallucination. What this AI agent did was it said, I'm not sure about this. Let me take a step back. Let me try to reason through what my process is, what my process should be for figuring this out. And that's what's missing in our customer service interactions right now, right? We have built customer service agents, AI agents, on this huge data set, all the interactions that all the customer service agents in the company have had over the past, scripts that we've fed it that we want our customer service agent to follow. And yet somehow we still get to a point where that customer service agent can't just send us a new shipping label or whatever it is that we need to do, right? Ideally, as we iterate on these things, as these models get to a point where they can start to reason Then we have more interactive agents. The generative AI becomes a more interactive AI. Um, I think that's one of the things we're going to see in 2025. We also need to talk a little bit about China, which is weird, but in January, a Chinese company released an AI model called DeepSeek, which is a direct competitor to OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, all of these things. And this wouldn't have been very interesting except for the fact that it put its AI model out and said that it cost about $5 million for it to put out this model compared to about $100 million for OpenAI's model that it had recently iterated on. And now, you know, how much we can believe that, how much of that is propaganda, how much of those finances are real or not, we'll never really know. But what it does mean is that there is a huge potential for the cost of AI, for the scaling factor of AI to sort of go up, the cost to go down. Um, there's a lot of great articles out there to read about DeepSeek and what it is and its claims and all that stuff. It is one of those things where it's already banned on all federal devices that are issued because it comes out of China. We don't really have any insight into the modeling that goes into it, that sort of thing. But it does exactly the same thing that all those other AI models do. And then AI in 2025, the other thing I want to talk about are our concerns going forward, right? I don't remember how long ago we last did an AI tech talk, but it was not that long ago, and already we have tons of new stuff to talk about because every few months these companies are releasing new models. The time lapse between the 3.0 version of ChatGPT and the 4.0 version of ChatGPT to the o1 version of ChatGPT to the o3 version of ChatGPT keeps going like this and shrinking because they keep being able to iterate because more people are using it. They have better algorithms to build the data sets that, um, some of that stuff, is just beyond my understanding. I don't have a computer science degree. I'm not an electrical engineering master's. A lot of that stuff. But um, we are at a point where this stuff is sort of exponentially increasing in ability, and so keeping up with the changes to AI is going to be harder and harder for the common consumer like you and I think, to understand like what the pitfalls are, that sort of thing. We also have, and I didn't put it on the slides here, so I'm just going to talk about it, everyone, or I didn't link to it on my little device to get to the next one. My concerns about AI haven't really shifted, and those are the questions I referred to earlier, which are uh, there's a huge 90% under the ice cap, where the 10% is the cool stuff that AI can do, and the 90% is how much are we burning up our environment by asking ChatGPT to do these things? Because every time you ask a question of one of these models, you are asking more and more water flow and more electricity to go into these server farms that are out in the middle of nowhere. It is a hugely increasing problem as more and more people rely on it. And so we can hope that the scaling that DeepSeek proved, that their money, the money they pour into it has gone down, the efficiency of their model has gone up. But be aware that every time you type into ChatGPT, you are pumping carbon into the environment. And then the other question, the question we had earlier, is the ethics of these AI models. Just today, breaking news, everyone. There was a judgment in a lawsuit that a publisher had filed against a now bankrupt AI company, but an AI company that accused them of copyright infringement by building their data set on copyrighted materials. Publishers have filed suit against OpenAI for this. Artists and companies that host art online have filed copyright suits against the AI companies that are trying to build generative AI models for this, because those data sets have to be built on something that already existed, and that already existed information, especially in the case of art, but often in the case of newspaper articles or novels or research papers or whatever, that information belongs to someone. They spent time and labor on creating it, and then a programming company, a tech company came in and built a model on top of that without paying anybody the proceeds of their labor, and that's a tricky situation. So also using AI sometimes makes me feel a little icky on that front. So everybody, what's that? Yes. Yeah, yeah. All right, everybody. So it's 2:36. We're going to take about a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 2:41 or 2:42. If you have questions, I saw some of them pop up in chat already, in Zoom, but also questions around the room. We'll come around and record them. And we'll come back at that point and try to answer your questions before we get out of here. All right. Thanks, everybody. All right, everybody. It's 2:42, and actually we have a ton of questions. So, unsurprisingly, we have a ton of questions. One basic one was, what does the GPT stand for in Chat GPT? Which is one of those things you're like, oh yeah, what does a GPT stand for? It stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, which is just a fancy way of saying, take this thing and transform it based on all the stuff you learned from what you have in your model set. So generative pre-trained transformer. All right, so I do want to go back to the question that we had in the middle of our session, which was, where is it getting all of this information? Who is teaching it these things? Are humans teaching it these things? And I want to just take a step back for a second and think about all the time that this might be different per person, but like there's a lot of time you can spend on the internet just clicking on things, right? You hop onto Wikipedia and you look something up and you're like, oh, that's a cool painting. Who's that guy? Oh, what museum is that in? What city is that museum in? Where is this all going, right? So think about how endless the internet is. Think of that as the data set that these things are trained on. And not just that, but firms, Google included, go into libraries, huge research libraries. They have very high-res scanners that they set up, and they scan book after book after book and try to get all that information into their servers. They're trying to build a model of human knowledge. And so that is essentially what they're building their data sets on. One thing I didn't talk about in 2025 that a lot of people said we should sort of expect to see coming, maybe not this year, but in the near future, is that these large language models are great, except they're not very contextual. And at some point, we're going to start seeing AI companies geared towards very specific niche fields that they're going to be able to build large language models that are geared very much so towards whatever libraries that. But you're going to start seeing contextual large language models instead of large language models that are built on the totality of human knowledge and thus are not always going to be able to give you the best, most relevant information. All right, so we got a lot of questions, and I'm just going to try to go through these bit by bit. One of the first questions that came in was, how can you use it to help with writing a research paper while being careful to not cheat? And so this is a tough one because you absolutely can use it to help you out, but you got to lay the groundwork first. And that is, you got to do all the research. You got to make sure that you are pulling your research into a coherent whole and then asking ChatGPT or whatever model to help you come up with some information from this. I do want to steer you away from that because it's very easy to fall afoul of any kind of intellectual integrity rules on your college campuses. Almost all of your syllabi will very explicitly these days say that you cannot use generative AI. Although maybe that's different nowadays. I don't know. But do all that legwork ahead of time. Make sure that you are citing your sources when you are assembling all that information so that any kind of source reference can be put into the document, and check your school's guidelines. I mean, that's a pretty good question, right? Because ChatGPT, like I said earlier, can sometimes make things up. You can ask it to I don't know, give you some facts about frogs, and then I don't know, facts about frogs is pretty easy. They're out there everywhere. But if you ask it to give you facts about the, certain nature of a folding protein or something like that, um, it understands what that means. It understands that research papers have been published about it. It may make up a research paper that it is referring back to help you get, more uh, more authoritative on your source, something like that. With an encyclopedia, you had human beings doing the fact checking and doing the assembling. And so you could, you were able to verify the source behind the information. ChatGPT, these models are getting better about verifying their sources, about publishing where the source information is and where they got their information, but they're still not great about it. And so it's a great question, right? A lot of futurists look at us as Luddites when when we sort of say like, "Oh, don't use this to generate your research papers," because like it is in the end a tool. Human beings have invented this thing. It is a tool that we have come up with, but um, just proceed with caution, I guess is this is what I would say. A specific question here. Recently, I began to see summaries, AI generated summaries at the top of my email. And that makes this person feel uneasy and that they don't feel the need for those summaries. And can you discontinue this feature without ending your email subscription or your email login with that program? Assuming this is with Google, with Gmail, yes, you can go into Google Gemini, go into the settings and extensions and turn on or off what Google apps you want Gemini in. And if you click it off in Gmail, you no longer see any of the Gemini product doing any of that summarizing or anything in your Google email. I don't know off the top of my head whether or not that actually turns off Google reading your email, because Google owns your email, everyone, just so you know. They make their money off of serving up advertisements based on all of their, their search engine, all of the stuff that they've built. So, we had a question, is the data fact checker in the AI program a human or another AI attempt? So I was saying earlier when we had that question about, what's the difference between using an AI program and an encyclopedia? It tries to cite its sources, and if it's citing its sources, you want to make sure you're clicking on those sources that it's citing to make sure that they're an actual source. This is another one of those ethical questions where some of the work is done um, by people, and often that those people are in developing countries and paid very poorly. So, like, think Africa, think Southeast Asia. They are, their labor is used at a very uh, under market value rate compared to what you would pay somebody in the United States for doing that sort of tagging and metadata and fact checking and stuff like that. A lot of this stuff is programmatic and generated inside the program. So I think, check your sources, be aware that if you're using it, there are some ethical concerns, and verify everything. We have a lot of sort of existential questions here, which I'm going to try to go through. But here's a big one. How will this impact the marketing field and digital marketing careers? I think anybody who says that AI is not going to impact employment in the next 5 or 10 years is probably like sticking their head in the sand. And in the way that like machines and assembly lines came for blue collar jobs, I feel like AI is probably coming for my job at some point. White collar jobs are probably somewhere down the line. In terms specifically of the marketing field and digital marketing careers, tons of companies are already using this. They are generating text. They are, coming up with ideas. They are using it for brainstorming. Coke famously made an entire commercial using AI generated images, text, all of that stuff. And it's been, out there for a little while now. So, uh,
Instead of a company hiring an advertising agency, they can create their own.
Right. Yeah. One of the reasons, yeah. One of the reasons that it's a little, it feels a little icky to me, like my friends that are in the digital, in the graphic design field, their Photoshop has generative AI built into it now. It can take a photograph that you have and you can expand the field on that photograph and it will automatically fill in the field around that photograph and try to create what would be happening around the photograph, what sort of things, it's it's a weird feeling to be alive in 2025. Yeah, I think it's, a concern for a lot of people in a lot of fields going forward. Um, how does AI interpret different languages and how does it generate content that comes from a different language? Its model set is built on English, just like its model set is built on Tamil from Malaysia. Where does the Tamil language come from? Anyway, just as it's built on French, just as it's built on German and Spanish, right? As many web pages as as are out there and written in English that we come across, Spanish speaking people have billions and billions of web pages in Spanish. There have been books and all that stuff. So and it's not hard to teach a computer that kind of context, the language switching context these days. It still has trouble with idioms, right? Like, to trying to get a computer to figure out, I don't know, some kind of phrase that we use that, seeing red, that's really common across all kinds of languages, but that sort of thing, right? Languages have different idioms that mean something specifically to those people that doesn't really mean the same thing to us. A computer can still have trouble understanding that, but getting it to know that it's reading Spanish and outputting stuff in Spanish, that's not that difficult. Can it write articles or papers that are indistinguishable from human written content? That's a great question. How savvy are you? Once you start reading this stuff, you do start to get the feel for what has AI generative sheen on it. Images especially, but like text that is generated by AI has a certain feel to it that it just doesn't, that reads as not coming from a human being. It just feels a little, I don't know, you know it when you see it. Um, Can we have some guidance on how the career world should be maneuvered now for young professionals starting to seek job opportunities and scared AI might alter our future? Um, no. I don't have a good answer for this one. This is what I was saying, a few times through the talk is that, we just did a talk on AI 6 months ago or whatever, and we're back again, AI in 2025, and we're presenting, half of the presentation is different content at this point because the field is changing so quickly. Um, I think that, there's a lot of research that you can do on this to position yourself in a way that will help you, uh, uh, that'll help you advance, that'll help you not be quite as scared for the future, but also, like being aware that this is going to have huge implications for working people, for humanity is probably the best mindset to move forward in. I wish I had a better answer for that question. I'm sorry, question asker. Will AI keep and in what form all user interaction with it? That is good question. The second question is, any user suggested modifications, will AI delete draft versions of its output to you? And does it only preserve the final version that the user accepts? I think I understand this question. I know I do understand the first part of this question. So, to get a history of your interactions with these AI programs, you are almost certainly going to have the paid version of these programs. ChatGPT, if you have an account with them and if you pay for their services, does in fact keep a history of all of the prompts that you have given ChatGPT. And to some degree, even with the free tier, you can go back. I don't know how far it goes back, but you can go back and see the prompts that you've given it. And if you're like, oh, I was thinking about this thing related to that prompt, you can reopen that prompt, see all the generative stuff that it's given you, and then continue with that prompt, which is pretty cool. I don't know how it works with the other types of programs. You saw that in the song generative AI, that Udio, that it had a library of songs that it made for me. I can't say how long those things are kept for the free tier, but you can at least certainly go back and listen to them, and then you can iterate on them further. You can click on them and ask it to, refine this part of it or focus on this section of the song, from seconds, from the 30th second to the 35th section, and try to write a song that's a little more like that or something. That's that sort of thing. The other thing to know is that these programs, even if you can't see the history of what you have entered into those prompts, they are absolutely keeping everything that you have entered into those prompts. Not only because it's helping their models learn what humans want from it, what they can do, but also it's a monetizable data set for them in the future, knowing selling your information on that sort of thing. Some apps can create music and images. Are those apps now called AI? Yes. So, yeah, pretty much any program wherein you enter a prompt and it generates an output for you, that is AI these days. We can still get into the philosophical quibble about whether or not that's intelligence, right? But we've all basically culturally agreed to call these things AI. And so all these programs going forward are pretty much what we're going to call AI. They're generative AI. They're not what we would call general AI, which is that science fiction equivalent of having a brain in a computer where you can ask it a question like Star Trek and get an answer that actually means something. Um, I don't know. Some people are really optimistic about that, and some people are really pessimistic that that's ever going to come around. And I'm just a librarian here, remembering watching Worf and Picard when I was 12. Um, and the newest free version of ChatGPT question asker that you can download is GPT-4. I did say that there are models after that. You can pay to have access to that O3 model that I talked about, where it does the reasoning, where it hits a dead end and it says, it sort of shows you, oh, I don't know about this. I'm going to go back and try again and reiterate on my, what I'm trying to figure out here. That is a thing you have to pay for. A lot of the art programs that are going to output something high quality are paid for programs. Midjourney and Stable Diffusion are both paid for programs. You have to have a subscription to Adobe services to get their generative AI built into Photoshop and that sort of thing. I'm gonna assume any kind of video generation program these days is gonna ask you to pay for it, because that's very resource intense compared to anything else that we're asking AI to do. If asking ChatGPT to answer a question textually is burning a tree, asking something to make a video for you is the equivalent of, like, I don't know, yeah, a rainforest, right? It's very resource intense. All right, I think I got to all of the questions. Um, please feel free to use your librarians as resources and any further questions you have here at the Bucks County Library. And we have tons of resources on AI in our collection. One more question. That's a great question. So, um, I don't know that I know across the width and the breadth of the organization what the American Library Association and a lot of larger library organizations like Bucks County Library are doing. What we are doing is generating an AI policy that sort of gives guidelines for how employees should be using AI if they're going to use it, and what it means in the workplace. So, for instance, I don't know if it's the Carnegie Library system, but I was in a workshop recently, in a webinar recently, where someone was talking about their AI policy. Any publicity that they put out that uses generated text or generated images has to explicitly say this was generated with AI, with which model they used, what source it came from, and there was something else, but now I can't remember what the something else was. I think basically, as long as you are saying that's where it came from, you're probably in the clear as far as, covering yourself legally. But boy, this is a murky field, and the law is not keeping up with technology in the way that it should, I don't think. One more question. Yeah.
You mentioned scanning books,
Yeah.
libraries,
Right.
documents. Is that a job for a computer person to go in and do it, or are they hiring anyone off the street for X amount just to
Yeah, that's
scan? They get that into the system.
So that's a funny question. The answer to the first question, is that a job for computer scientists, is that probably there's someone on site who is able to handle that, but no, it is not a like a one of those high skilled positions. I think they're going to use people, that they'll employ someone who they're not going to have. They will get to the lowest common denominator is what I'm trying to say there. And what they do, depending on the source, is they have really big flatbed, high resolution scanners. They get those things through. In the case of like books where they're not worried about damaging them, where they're maybe like they're not rare books. They're not worth anything. They will actually cut the binding. They'll put them through a high-speed scanner page by page as quickly as they can. The computer programs, it's called OCR, ocular character recognition. Is that right, guys? OCR? Anyway, ocular character recognition then interprets what it's seeing and makes it into the words that it sees. It's funny because that's still not great these days, but it's better than nothing. And the more high resolution the scanner is, the better it is. And then they build a database on that, right? They're trying to get as many books as possible. In an idealist's view, they're trying to catalog all of human knowledge. In a pessimist's view, they're trying to capitalize on all of human knowledge. um, and so, there are some really cool benefits to this. A rare book, a manuscript like a Shakespeare folio or something that exists in a rare book archive can very carefully be scanned in a really, detailed way that gives you access to it from your home so you can see that really beautiful illumination on that manuscript from the comfort of your office or your living room or whatever on your laptop. And to me, that is a pretty cool benefit. And then there are the downsides, which is sometimes they are used to build models of human knowledge that don't share the fruits of the labor with the people that did all the work to, build it, to archive it, to do the things that made it possible for the people coming in and scanning it to build their database. Yeah.
I read some books on Libby.
Yeah.
And is that how it's been done on my iPad? Is that
No, most of those books that you get on Libby are actually so these days when a publisher is generating a book, all of that layout is done in a computer file ahead of time before it's even printed on the book. And the computer file that's generated has different ways of being output. And what they're doing is they're taking that computer file even before it's printed and they're saying, turn it into an ebook so somebody can just download it and read it on their yeah. Um, one thing we didn't talk about is that this isn't quite as prevalent on the publishers' purchasing pages that we go through as librarians, although it's getting more so. But if you go onto Amazon to buy a book, there is just so much generated AI crud on their web pages these days that you have to, like if you don't know what kind of book you're looking for and you're going to Amazon for some kind of research opportunity. I mean, no, I see a lot of head shakes out here. Like, yeah, just don't go to Amazon for research, but also be very aware that there's a lot of generated AI stuff on Amazon. Somebody looking to just make a quick buck and go into ChatGPT for, like write me a romance novel starring a hockey player and a ballerina or something like that. And then, yeah. Yeah. All right, everybody. It's 3:06. Thank you for staying 6 minutes after time. Appreciate you all hanging about. Our next tech talk is in April 9th. Keep an eye out for the calendar, and that is library resources. That is the kind of resources, the technology resources you can find here at the library. So show up then.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.